So, taking up this poem of Rabia's, Abreast in the Sky, I hear talk about the famous. I hear talk about different cities. The most intimate events of families come to my ears. I hear about temples in the present, and I might, no. I hear about temples. Goodness me, it keeps going backwards. I hear about temples and mosques and saints. All that can be said, I have heard. All that can be wanted, I have seen. My interest in this world has waned though, not because I am depressed. A fish in a bowl, I was, a bottom feeder. But now I nurse upon a breast in the sky. A breast in the sky. I hear talk about the famous. I hear talk about different cities. The most intimate events of families come to my ears. I hear about temples and mosques and saints. All that can be said, I have heard. All that can be wanted, I have seen. My interest in this world has waned though, not because I am depressed. A fish in a bowl I was, a bottom feeder, but now I nurse upon a breast in the sky. As we read through this book, we find this metaphor of a breast in the sky from more than one saint. So I'm wondering, and I would like to have some response from, if you care to. I'm wondering if indeed it is a metaphor. Or is it a truth that is being expressed? Excuse me. I got something trying to go down the wrong way. Somebody else is going to have to talk for a minute. Or for as long as you like.
Okay, I'll take that up. This is Justine. Well, you can see that on the screen. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to answer your question. I had a different thought on those last three stanzas, so maybe we should come to that later.
Go right ahead, Justine.
Well, my interest in this world is waned, though not because I am depressed. A fish in a bowl I was, a bottom feeder, but now I nurse upon a breast in the sky. I read that in two different ways. The bottom feeder, I think, refers to her status in life on one level, which I certainly agree with and understand, having come from a rather despised subculture, as well as having never really made any money. But I think she's also talking about a bottom feeder as in, being engaged in actions of the material world. I mean, that's really bottom feeding stuff. And the breast in the sky is mother's milk, the milk of goddess, of Durga. And I think that, when I read that, I see her speaking about her social status as well as her spiritual, as opposed to material status. And then, when you feed upon a breast in the sky, you're not feeding on Twinkies and junk. You're feeding on, the nectar, the Amrita, in a sense. those are my thoughts.
Well said. Anybody else?
I like those thoughts, Justine. Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing. I agree that I think in the beginning, she came to know all the intimate events, I guess, from all the people that came to her. So at that time, it was, even if a lot of times we turn to God because we dislike things happening, we are frustrated. But it's, I guess, even more sweeter to turn to God because there's something better out there, like nectar, she said, rather than running away from something, she's running towards something. And that seems like a very positively motivating way of looking at it.
Indeed. Beautiful. She says, it's not because I'm depressed. Not because I am depressed. My interest in this world has waned, which is true of all spiritual aspirants. Or their interest in the world becomes totally transformed, like Saint Francis of Assisi, who sees everything in the world as the divine.
That speaks to me as well, not because I am depressed, because it acknowledges the fact that she may be depressed, but that's not why she feels this way. And one of the biggest struggles, at least I'm just going to lay it out, I'm having in my personal life is not knowing if my waning interest in the world has to do with depression or spiritual growth. And, it's really kind of in a way stood in the way of my being able to figure out what I want to do moving forward. So I'm just being honest.
Well, good. As I understand it, nobody figures this out in a hurry, Justine. Why as Swami Swahananda said, the only measure of spiritual progress is change in behavior. But we look at that change in behavior and we can legitimately ask why.
But we also, as far as change in behavior, we, my words, I can't find my words. We judge, that's not the word I want, but we judge that behavior, whether it's changed or not, against a certain background that is sort of consistent. But when the world is the external world is in greater turmoil than it usually is, it's kind of throws all of that off.
Amen.
Wait, is the world in turmoil? Thank you.
Brother Shankara, I think for me, your talk yesterday was just so, I don't know, uplifting, because finally I think I grasped the meaning of Kandana Bhava better. And so with everything going on, but the avatar or the saints come to, I think, give us an anchor to hold on and take us out of this chain, of this cycle. It just kind of like was a aha moment for me, I think. It's
Good. Yes, so you correctly identified the metaphor of the chain. This link, that link, that link, that link. Breaker of this world's chain. So anything else to say about Rabia's poem, Breast in the Sky? Or should we go on to the next one?
I'd like to hear you address why you asked the question if you thought it was a metaphor or not, because I don't think we've really touched on that.
Well, as we see from the other saints in this book, this business of either being a nursemaid, literally, even the men, being a nursemaid to the divine, or having the nursemaid, having the divine be the nursemaid to this, to the soul. It seems like what they're saying is that some kind of sustenance, actual sustenance, is being exchanged. So Rabia says, I used to be a bottom feeder, which was correctly identified as the worldliness that she is now finding her interest waning in. At least that's how it seems to me, correctly identified. And then this taking nourishment directly, their nourishment that counts, directly from the divine. But now I nurse from a breast in the sky. Beautiful. And as I said, it looks to me like the number of times that this occurs in these saints' work, it can't be, from my perspective, it can't be coincidental. It looks like they're speaking about something very direct, something that actually is empirical experience for them.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Coincidentally, I'm reading this book, Seeing God Everywhere by Swami Shraddhananda.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line here which says, entering the body, God pervades every pore as consciousness. And this is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of goes with what you're saying, that it's not just metaphorical. This, God actually enters, I guess, the embodied state of us and pervades as consciousness through every pore.
That's what, and Shraddhananda was himself a realized soul. He was recognized as such in his lifetime. And one of the most impish and charming human beings you ever want to meet. So yes, I think you're right. I think that line does directly apply.
I also think that for poets and, very serious seekers and saints, there's really not much difference between metaphor and reality.
Ha 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 ha. Well said, Justine. Yeah, what they're saying as metaphor is a reality for them. Yes, they're using it so that we can understand as best we can what they're trying to say. Well said.
Well, I just have something that I want to add to that idea of metaphor and reality. I feel like every use of language is metaphorical. Like it's like the idea of the finger pointing at the moon isn't the moon, or like the map is not the territory.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, even so, like for example, like Einstein's law of relativity, right? That's just a description of this natural, of this phenomena that Einstein had constructed so brilliantly, but it's not the same. In a way, it is like just a metaphor describing this phenomenon occurring in nature. So in a way, yeah, like what Justine said, I think it's just, all language is just kind of a metaphor, not just for like poets and spiritual aspirants, but I guess the poets and the spiritual aspirants are the ones who realize that.
Ah, well said, Liam. And yes, of course, language is not the reality, as you said. The map is not the territory. So yes, language is necessarily. But when I said this about this taking sustenance directly from God, uh, that is what is being pointed to, and so what you say is absolutely true, and I think what Rabia and these other saints are saying is that this is their direct experience. So if there's nothing more, would somebody like to read the next poem? Anybody?
I can read, Brother Shankara.
Please, dear. Remember to read it slowly and read it twice.
Could you wait till 4? My understanding used to be like a stream that easily described all along the bank as its skin moved through the world. Entered God, my vision became like his. It flooded out over existence. I knew no limits. The future I can now see with as much certainty as the past. If I stretched my arm its full length, I could caress any creature in this universe. And Rabia does not exaggerate. Thus, going to bed one night, I knew a thief would be breaking in at 3 a.m. So I wrote a note and put it on my door that said, could you wait till 4? For the passion in prayers usually starts to wane by then. Could you wait till 4? My understanding used to be like a stream that easily described all along the bank as its skin moved through the world. When I entered God, my vision became like his. It flooded out over existence. I knew no limits. The future I can now see with as much certainty as the past. If I stretched my arm its full length, I could caress any creature in this universe. And Rabia does not exaggerate. Thus going to bed one night, I knew a thief would be breaking in at 3 a.m. So I wrote a note and put it on my door that said, could you wait till 4? For the passion in prayers usually starts to wane by then.
Wow.
It is.
That's all I can say about this.
Got it.
There's so much observation, truth, and instruction in this poem. This poem is just overwhelming.
Mhm.
Anybody got anything to say about it?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
do you think that she was more seeing with her right mind there, because she was saying that the future I can now see with as much certainty as the past? So that she knew everything at that point. She was starting to see with her right mind.
That would be one way of talking about it. Yes, I think so. But I think it even transcends that. I think it even transcends that. I don't know how to put it into words, but when she says that her vision became as God's, and this is omniscience. If she says, I can reach out and touch, caress any creature in the universe, this is omnipresence. So this is beyond the capacities. Something happens to these people that is beyond explanation by anything of our embodiment. Though you're absolutely right that the right mind would be the genesis of it. But as I say, I think it goes beyond that. And then, the wonderful thing about this is at the end of the poem is this humorous incident that contains so much instruction. So because of her omniscience, she knew that a thief would be breaking in at 3, so she says. Could you wait till 4? Because the passion in prayers usually wanes by then. Well, she's giving us the instruction that if you want to attain the state that I'm talking about, and this, of course, has been said by yogis from every tradition. They sleep during the daytime and do something else at night. Anybody else got anything to say? I'm just rattling on and on. But thank you, Michaela. I think you're absolutely right. The genesis is the identification of awareness with the heart and the right mind, rather than certainly with the left mind.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. Do you think that she was saying too, could you wait till 4, which I would take as 4 a.m. for the passion and prayers usually starts to wane by then? Would that have any significance that a lot of the monks in the whole kind of world kind of don't people get up around 4 a.m. to pray, do their prayers?
No, they a lot of them who are monastics get up around 4 a.m. and but the yogis, and each of these that are in this book seems to be a yogi rather than in any way a traditional monastic. They start their devotions, they start their praying when other people are going to bed. And 3 a.m. is said to be the peak. The peak. There's something very special about the hour of 3 a.m. And just what you were saying, Michele, you know, when you said that, it clicked in. The first stanza of this, my understanding used to be like a stream that easily described all along the bank as its ken moved through the world. That seems like a description of the left mind. You're absolutely right. And so then she said, when I entered God, which could be a description of entering the right brain or right mind consciousness. Good. That first stanza definitely is a description. The linear left mind. Anybody else?
I have a comment and a question. The comment is, it looks like she's describing Nirvikalpa Samadhi almost. And the question was the first stanza. I'm glad you clarified, because I was having a hard time understanding that, because I do not know what exactly is the ken of the river, the stream bank.
Oh, ken means, it's another word for understanding.
Oh.
Ken. It's a word for our grasp of the world. Oh, I ken that. It's actually a word that is used in Celtic. I know that. I understand that. So my understanding moved through the world. My grasp of the world moved through the world. And you know, it's hard for us standing outside Samadhi to know whether she's describing Nirvikalpa or Savikalpa Samadhi. When I entered God, my vision became like his. It flooded out over existence. I knew no limits. Well, this sounds like what Patanjali describes in chapter 4 of the Yoga Sutra. This is omniscience. But the omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence that comes through spiritual practice, he says, is the last barrier before Nirvikalpa, before Kaivalya. I think we can talk this way because there's none of our Christian friends or people who are primarily Christian are with us this evening. So, I mean, by that I mean Heidi and June. We seem to be a collection of Vedantists. So, omniscience, the future I can know, I can now see with as much certainty as the past. That's omniscience. If I stretched my arm to its full length, I could caress any creature in the universe, and Rabia does not exaggerate. That's omnipresence. She doesn't describe anything that could be thought of as omnipotence. She comes back to this being able to know the future. Thus, going to bed one night, I knew a thief would be breaking in at 3 a.m. So I wrote a note and put it on my door that said, could you wait till 4? Her sense of humor just slays me. For the passion in prayers usually starts to wane by then. It means she's been praying from at least 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock during that period. If you read Swami Prabhavananda's How to Know God, he talks about something that's said in one of the Upanishads, and that is that to the yogi, night is day and day is night. The activities of the usual activities of the world are a darkness to them. And when everybody else is asleep, the world is quiet, they are able to enter these other states of awareness. Anybody else? Yeah, if you read Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga Swayam, if you read chapter 4, his translation and discussion of Patanjali's chapter 4, you'll find what I'm talking
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
about. Mhm. And we've now come down to the difference between knowing stuff and being stuff. It's really this first stanza is such a lovely description of the left mind. My understanding used to be like a stream that easily described all along the bank as its ken moved through the world. That is such a wonderful description. That's what we do. We think we know exactly what we're seeing as we go along. Easily described all along the bank as its ken moves through the world. Shall we go on to the next poem? Anybody got anything more to say about this one? Okay. Justine, have you got your book at hand?
I certainly do.
Hey, you want to read the next one?
Sure. A lover who wants his lovers near. He is sweet that way, trying to coax the world to dance. Look how the wind holds the trees in its hands, helping them to sway. Look how the sky takes the fields and the oceans and our bodies in its arms and moves all beings toward his lips. God must get hungry for us. Why is he not also a lover who wants his lovers near? Beauty is my teacher, helping me to know he cares for me. So I'll go through it again. A lover who wants his lovers near. He is sweet that way, trying to coax the world to dance. Look how the wind holds the trees in its hands, helping them to sway. Look how the sky takes the fields and the oceans and our bodies in its arms and moves all beings toward his lips. God must get hungry for us. Why is he not also a lover who wants his lovers near? Beauty is my teacher, helping me to know he cares for me.
Anybody else feel a little bit reassured by this poem?
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
I like where it's beautiful how the wind holds the trees in its hands, helping them to sway. And so she's saying, beauty is my teacher, helping me to know he cares for me. And so everything here that's beautiful to me, she's saying is a reflection of God's love for her, because the caring comes from his love. So it's a reflection, like a mirror.
Yes, and it's interesting that Father Thomas Keating relates precisely the same experience about the wind and the trees. And he describes his illumination experience in one. You can find the video on YouTube. Father Thomas Keating. I forget the title of it just now, but he describes it's a biographical thing of him, how he came to be a monk from being the son of one of New York's most important lawyers, and how then he went on to become anyway, we're not talking about Rabia. We're not talking about Keating. We're talking about Rabia. In any event, as part of that biographical film, he describes how he sees God swaying the trees as part of his illumination experience, swaying the trees and fluttering the leaves.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
I think this stanza where it begins, God must get hungry for us.
Mm-hmm.
The second line, it depends on where we put the emphasis. It kind of almost changes the meaning. If we say, why is he not also a lover who wants his lover near? That looks like questioning, why is he not also? But if we change it to, why is he not also a lover who wants his lovers near? That's more confirmatory that he does want us.
And I think the ambiguity is very deliberate, dear. It's up to us to decide whether we want to be reassured, because she starts the poem. He is sweet that way, trying to coax the world to dance. In other words, dance with each of us. And then she gives these illustrations. And then this stanza, as you say, that has this ambiguity. Are you going to believe it or not? We're talking about saints here. You know, we're talking about a saint, a genuine, certifiable saint. And it's interesting that she doesn't mince words, but she certainly can, as you said, write something that can be taken in two ways, depending on how you want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for pointing it out. So I am because that line or that stanza had been confounding me until you pointed that out. Because I was reading it, and I was like, it seems like a question, but it's not a question. And when you pointed that out, and I could see that it really cleared that up for me. And I just kind of wanted to add to that about how one chooses to pronounce that, and this kind of metaphor of the dancer. I think of all the art forms, dance like, you know, like a dance cannot happen or be performed without like the dancer being there. So to kind of clarify what I mean, it's like, so like a painting, you know, one can observe a painting, you know, without the painter or the artist being there, or, you know, reading literature. You know, we can read Dickens, and Dickens has left this earth long before any of us. So, but like a dance, we can't witness a dance without the participation of the dancer, you know, actively being there. So kind of like in that vein of what was just pointed out, right? It's like, it like, I think it's like, you know, it may, you know, unless we want to be near, or this is how I'm interpreting it, unless, you know, as we are part of the world and, you know, the dancers, it is up to us to want to be near God. Like we need our participation, and it's kind of how we choose to interpret something like a stanza like that. We can either interpret it as something of doubt or as something of certainty, but it really requires our ability to use discernment and choice.
Cindy, are you still there? Do you have anything to say about this? Because of as Liam just pointed out, there's a great deal about art and artists here. Are you still available to us?
I don't really have anything to say tonight.
Okay.
I'm listening to y'all and enjoying it.
Okay.
And I keep having to get up and down and deal with some stuff, so, but I'm listening. Anyway,
Sorry, dear. Yeah. Well, thank you for
y'all carry
responding.
on, but thanks for checking in.
Right.
Okay.
Brother Shankar,
Yes, dear.
the last stanza, which is beauty is my teacher, helping me to know he, who is God, cares for me. But beauty was the one which ran against her. Luck, really. Brothel bought her for large sums of money because of her beauty, and people abused her beauty. And what does she means there, that it is her teacher?
Well, you know,
Trying to make sense out of that.
if you remember a couple, 3 poems back,
Yeah.
she said she had to come to the point where she could thank, forgive, and be grateful for all of the abuse that had come to her, all of the wounds that her body had to bear. So her beauty, this is very profound what you're saying.
It is.
Her beauty, as well as the beauty that she sees in the world. But her own beauty, the fact that she was forced into the life that she was forced to live because of her beauty.
Beauty.
But it even that was her teacher. And I think you really touched on a very important point in this poem. She came to where she is as she's speaking to us because of everything that happened to her, including her beauty and its results.
So it made her closer to divinity, God, after all the painful experiences she went through.
Beauty is my teacher, helping to know he cares for me. Like he cares for the trees, like he cares for the sky, the fields, the ocean, and our bodies in his arms, and moves all beings toward his lips.
God's lips.
So even though she lived that life, she came to not see it as degraded in any way. And she came to see every wound
It's a lesson.
as moving her closer to what she became.
That is
So
true.
her beauty and that, what we would see as ugliness,
I can
no
understand.
longer, she no longer sees as ugly.
That's right.
Which, isn't this one of the meanings of sainthood?
Yes.
You know, they transcend every limitation, every limitation. What she talked about in the last poem. Could you wait till 4?
Yes.
That poem still makes me laugh when I think about
I got it. Yes.
it.
I see that sometimes painful experiences lead you to more divinity. You get closer and closer to God when you forgive whatever happened. I see the point what you were saying. Now I got it. Thank you.
Well, if you want to understand more profoundly why I think this way,
You're right.
read the biography of Saint John of the Cross in this book, and then read his poems. He just transcended. I mean, you talk about horror. He was tormented. He was tortured. I mean, the way he was forced to live for 9 months of his life is almost beyond imagination.
Even
Yet-
Jesus Christ.
Hmm?
Jesus had go through
Oh, yes.
tormentation. I mean, that's where he rose above. I can see. Now I'm connecting the dots. In the beginning, I was like, oh my God, the abuse she went through, she says, yes, it does teach a lesson. Every time you get closer to God, yes.
Well,
Thank you so much.
only because she was able to see what her teacher was telling her.
Yes,
You,
that's true.
you have to
She survived.
love everyone who tormented you.
That's true.
There is a
Thank you, Shankar.
You bet, dear. Yes, Swam.
there's a wonderful poem of Rabia that Swamiji quotes in his Inspired Talks, and I've been trying to find it and I cannot, but it kind of goes to what Jaime was talking, where Rabia clearly says that she kind of transcended all this. It's a beautiful poem. I'll try to find it next time.
Okay.
And it like 2 other people come and meet her, 2 of these priests, and how they are kind of condescending, and then she replies by saying that I didn't have any problem or something like that. I mean, it's beautiful.
Well, actually, it's in this book.
Is it? Oh,
Yeah, it's one of the poems in this book.
oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, you'll find it. It's kind of toward the end. Two wise men come to her, and she ends up telling them, both your visions are limited.
Right. Yes, that's the one.
Yeah, it's here. So, Swayam, since we're speaking, would you like to read the poem Troublemakers? We're not hearing you, dear.
Troublemakers. Since no one really knows anything about God, those who think they do are just troublemakers. Troublemakers. Since no one really knows anything about God, those who think they do are just troublemakers.
Inevitably. Inevitably. There's nobody that's so abrasive as somebody who has a fixed opinion about the divine and wants to insist to you that they know about it. Since no one really knows anything about God. And this, again, is something that we hear echoed through this entire book. You think you know anything? You have this much. You have this much. You know, what does it say? One of the saints says, you know, all that you know is just not even the little toe of God that you're seeing. You know, the frontiers are beyond your imagination. Anything else have? Anyone else have their? What does your experience bring you to about this poem?
I think this poem isn't simply referring in my ears to sort of fundamentalist and narrow descriptions of God and boastful concepts of God, but in my mind, this very much applies to Richard Dawkins.
Oh yeah.
And this whole rise of atheism in this culture is, you know, they're vehemently describing a God that I don't even recognize when they talk about what they don't believe in. And more, I've come to the conclusion that the problem with atheists is they have the same concept of God as a fundamentalist. They're denying a God that is not, has been reduced to anything but God.
Yes, exactly. Hafiz calls them the tiny gods. Don't worship the tiny gods, he says. You know, and I think you're right about Dawkins and the others. Their concept of what it is that they're denying is laughably limited. So, as Jesus said, be passersby. We don't need to pay any attention to them. They have their effect, but you know.
Every time I get into an argument with someone, which I don't do anymore, you know, but like someone says something rather limited to me, I jokingly think to myself, my God has 6 arms. How many does yours have?
Right.
It's not, it's not something I say or mean, but, you know, it just crosses my mind as funny.
Yes.
And I often think to myself, you need a bigger God.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why I love that poem that Hafiz is about. Don't worship the tiny gods. Liam, were you about to say something?
Yeah, actually, I did have a couple of things. Yeah, on what Justine was talking about, Richard Dawkins. You know, I do think that he does do a lot of good, though, kind of preoccupying a lot of the more fundamentalists and ignorant, I guess, spiritualists, because that's pretty much what he spends most of his time butting heads with. So it's kind of like, you know, I think he does serve a great purpose in, you know, I guess purifying the message of God by, you know, kind of battling with the, you know, kind of the ignoramus variety. But so that was one thing. But actually the main thing I wanted to say about that was, you know, I did read portions of, I think he had the book The God Delusion, and it was interesting to me because like a lot of the logic, especially for someone who was a biologist, or I think that's what he was back on, or genealogist, right, or genealogical biologist.
I don't remember.
Yeah, but you know, an empirical scientist, and you know, because I remember the main premise of the book, from what I gathered, or one of his main premises was that he was like attacking agnosticism by saying, like, you know, the question of whether or not you could like, basically he was saying that you can, you know, the question of whether God exists or not is provable. So like he wasn't really arguing that there was no God. He was just arguing, or he was trying to argue, that the question of whether God exists or not was something that could be proved, because that was something that agnostics cling to, like say, I don't know, one way or the other. And I thought that was a really, first of all, I thought that was kind of a so what kind of argument. I was just like, you know, like I don't really see what the big deal about that is. But what I wanted to say about that, and not to get too much into that, is that, you know, the more I thought about that, you know, point, was that it really didn't really make sense to me, especially from someone with a strong scientific background, because I started thinking, like, you know, how do you prove something that doesn't exist scientifically? Since, you know, from my understanding, scientific proof comes from what can be seen, right? So, you know, one can conclude that, okay, there is no proof that something exists, right? But if something doesn't exist, how can you have proof of that? Because it doesn't exist, right? Like, you need to have proof of something, which is, you know, you have to see it, which is something that exists, right? And if something doesn't exist, then there's nothing to see, right? Like, there's just no proof of the non-existence because it doesn't exist. So really, if you kind of boil it down, it's just like, you could really only prove that God exists, or say that, you know, well, there isn't any proof that God exists. Like, there's really, like, how do you have proof of something that is not in existence? You know what I mean? I know that was kind of a little sophistry, but like, just like the whole premise really didn't make it. Anyway, I kind of.
No, but you pointed to something that leads Swami Vivekananda to say, Patanjali is indeed scientific, because he shows you through his 8-step program to prove for yourself whether or not God exists. And that's the only proof that is ever going to convince you that God really exists, is your own empirical experience, which Rabia spoke about it in one of the earlier poems. She said it as, when I entered God. That's how she says it. When I entered God, I left behind this narrative description of the world, this left mind, and as Michaela correctly pointed out, the right mind, or heart-centered way of being. Everything changed. But her poems are the only proof of that for us. They don't prove anything to us. We can believe she means what she says. As she says, Rabia does not exaggerate. But they won't convince us of what she's saying. We only recognize what she's saying based on our own inner experience. And this is why Swami Vivekananda said there's no conflict or contradiction between empirical worldly science and spiritual knowledge or spiritual science. They're just two different ways of arriving at truth. And so, please, scientists, don't argue with us. Keep an open mind. And please, spiritual or religious people, don't judge the scientists for their search for truth the way they do. There's a wonderful, wonderful interview, very short. It's with Dr. Richard Feynman. And I'm not going to try to tell you all about it because we don't have much time left. But you can find it on YouTube. Dr. Richard Feynman being interviewed by the BBC. And it's very interesting what he says when he's asked the question, tell us what you know about God. Somebody put something on chat. Who was that?
So I think she had to go to the.
Oh, that's right. She's attending another class at 9 o'clock. So is it 9 already? It certainly is. It's 9 o'clock. Well, then we'll start next week with the poem, This Choir.
May I add a thought on all this as well?
Please, 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 Justin.
I think that when God reveals his immense nirguna form to you, one of the things that becomes clear is that every possibility, including every description science gives, every bit of atheism, it all fits within the enormity of God. So whenever Richard Dawkins speaks, I just hear God speaking. And whenever I hear scientific explanations of why God cannot exist and about the nature of reality, and then they ask the questions, well, if there are multiple universes, what does that do to your God? And I'm thinking, well, that fits within God too. You're not seeing the immensity of what we're describing here. And additionally, I'd like to add that, there's no greater proof of God's existence. If you take it, the idea that we are all, aham brahmasmi, tattvamasi, om shivoham, that we are God, what a glorious poetic irony that God has created, that he can come here, manifest, and doubt his own existence.
Yes.
Bit of a rant.
I forget which one of the Catholic saints it is, whether it's Saint John of the Cross or Saint Francis of Assisi, or one of the women saints. It says it is only in us that God asks questions. You're right, so right, Justine. That's perfect. That's perfect. Yes, God can come here and doubt his own existence. So, oh, dearly beloved, a flower at your feet for each one who comes to your open door. A flower at your feet for each one who stands by your open door and says, come to me, offering to break this world's chain that binds us down to ignorance, suffering, and death. A flower at your feet for each one who takes the path that you have struck through this, your jungle world. Om, Amen. Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. So, since we'll just want you to be safe and protected, so we'll chant this. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai, Durga, Durga, Durga. May you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be cheerful, may you be protected by Mother's grace. So good night until next time, which for those of you who wish, it'll be tomorrow night. We'll study the life of Holy Mother. And just so, because all of you are part of our family, we just got today, or maybe it was yesterday, the most lovely note from a devotee in Chennai who listens in on the Mother class. And, or maybe has heard the recordings, I'm not sure which. But in any event, one of the things that this devotee remarks on is the quality, the attributes of our congregation, and is really quite full of praise for those of you who are part of this congregation. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Jai Ma, Jai Ma, Jai Ma. You know that you're celebrated from here with every fiber of this being. And so may you be well, may you be cheerful, and see you next time, either next Monday or tomorrow evening, to study the Mother, to study the Mother's life. So good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Brother Shankara. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Right.